Hey everybody, what is going on? This is your man Scott Garber with my co-host and the GOAT himself, Andrew Petcash. Petty, my man, how we doing this morning?
Excited for some youth sports today. This is going to be a fun one.
Man, I tell you what, it's so full circle, Andrew, to go from playing in the youth sports arena, you playing basketball, me playing football, and now a decade later, sitting on the other side of it, talking about the business of youth sports. We got a couple really exciting guests that we're going to be pulling on here, but wanted to go ahead and do a little housekeeping as we go ahead and kick this off. This panel today is brought to you by Profluence, specifically Profluence, the community. So if you like what you're hearing, if you're feeling the conversation, we built a whole framework, a community of founders, investors, advisors, where we're doing this daily. So, we encourage all of you guys to use the chat function as we move through the conversation. It is set up in a webinar format, but we are able to see what you're thinking, and we're going to be pulling some questions off the shelf as we move through it. Andrew, any other housekeeping before we bring on our two guests?
No, excited to be here, and for everyone that's tuning in. I know we had over 250 people, asked to be invited, and then this morning was going on a walk, and there was you just see all the fields, and you just remember that it's such an integral part of our lives, and it's cool to dive into the business side. So I just wanted to call that out as you see the baseball and soccer and basketball, and we get to shape it every day.
Man, I think that's a great leap into to bringing on our two guests. So we could do this whole ensemble and introduction, but it's better from the horse's mouth. So we're going to go ahead and bring on David Geaslen and Peter Frintzilas. Gentlemen, happy Tuesday. How are we doing this morning?
Good. What's going on?
Good, guys. How are you? Good morning, everybody.
Man, we are thrilled. This is what we do it for, guys. I think as we move and navigate the world of sports, it's all about democratizing access and starting to understand and meet the folks that are shaping the environments that our kids are participating in, that are, the technologies that we're using to help power those leagues. And so we couldn't be happier to bring you both on here. To go ahead and kick things off, let's get to know who you guys are, where you come from, what you're doing, and then we're going to go head first into the conversations. Peter Frintzilas, you're front and center on my screen, so the floor is yours.
Hey, Scott. How are you? Hi, everybody. Looking forward to the conversation this morning. Peter Frintzilas, CEO of TeamSnap. I stepped in this role back in April of 21 at the point in which WAD Capital, growth equity firm out of Chicago, took a majority stake in the company. I had helped to lead our investment thesis into this youth sports tech space, having joined WAD Capital for about 15 months as an executive partner. Prior to that, 2 decades as a software operator, was at a company called Intralinks for about 7.5 years. We exited out of that company 3 times over 24 months, took its value from $829 million to $1.5 billion. But, that was very much focused on an ecosystem. There was much more financial markets, deal makers. And here it's youth sports, and how do we build a technology platform to connect all the stakeholders and provide significant value through enabling the relationships. It's been a great opportunity to be able to give back to the community as well. And Scott, Andrew, been great getting to know you guys over the past couple of years. So looking forward to the discussion.
Man, thank you so much. All right, Dave, big shoes to fill, my friend.
I'm the old guy in the group. Everybody else is young, running around youth sports. So I've been running around youth sports for about 20 years. Kids in it, my partner Sue and I, we're just looking around the fields and different things and going, this is not what we want our kids doing. So we started on an adventure in the early 2000s to change and get involved in what we could do in youth sports, events, clubs, media, things like that. Grew it all the way up in New England, and then had some private equity come in 18 and give us the resources to just take it national. And we spent really 19, 20, 21, and 22 growing it to 43 states, 9 sports, just making the revenue number so much bigger, number of kids. Had a great time doing that. And then we exited that in 23. And she and I are serial entrepreneurs. So we're just out dealing with guys like you. What can we do next? What's out there? What are the exciting things out there? But keeping our head in the space every day.
And Dave, following up on that, I'm curious on when you looked at the space and you said this isn't what we wanted it to be for our kids. what were some of those things, and do a lot of them still exist today, or were you able to accomplish and solve a lot of those, or what did that look like?
They all still exist today. It's a terrible thing when you have to have a conversation with somebody and say, yeah, I should get into youth sports because the bar is really low. That's just not what we should be saying. We should be saying, well, this experience is this. And I mean, you can't bring an Under Armour All-American football game live on TV experience down to youth soccer, but you can try at different levels. And it starts with the safety of the kids, the facility, the information. Pete knows the technology. Just tell parents where they're going, when they're supposed to be there, what's happening, and try and tie it all together. And I think we did a really good job of tying that together. But we were the biggest in what we were doing, but we're just a speck in how big this thing is. So I wish we could say, yeah, we fixed it or we did this. I don't think we did. I mean, not that we did anything wrong, it was just too big. But maybe we exposed it and showed that it can be done. It's just a lot of work because it's so big. It's just so big.
Yeah, and Pete, I know you've done some work at TeamSnap on the data behind it. Not to put you on the spot, I know we didn't go through this before, but any numbers stand out? Any sort of data you have behind how big this space is? And
Andrew, look, high level, you got about 75 million kids under the age of 18 in the United States, right? SFI data says about 60 million of them are participating in at least one sport per year. So you then layer in, the parents, the sports organizations, think about Dave and his entire staff, then think about all the volunteer organizations across the country, think about all the families. We look at this as a market that you're touching well over 50% of the U.S. population alone, right? And then you think about other large countries like Canada and elsewhere where sports is plays a predominant role in youth sports. Market size, and everybody throws around kind of that $37 billion number, which, depending on what's in and out, and Andrew, Scott, I think you guys have been doing some great work at really unpacking that. But the reality is it's a massive market. The CAGR, whether it's 10% or 19%, you layer that on to an already large market, you are getting into the $60-70 billion TAM in only a handful of years. And I think, between Dave and I, interesting balance, right? Kind of Dave and writing almost a playbook of how you go build a national organization like 3Step focused on that programming of sport and the infrastructure investments that need to be made in order to support it. And then TeamSnap, we're touching over 25 million of those parents, players, and fans. Sorry, it's fighting off a little bit of a cold. And, our lens here is really like we're the picks and the shovels sitting on the outside of what the Daves and, teams like that are building across the country. And how do we leverage our technology platform, our reach, our distribution, whether it's from on the sports organization side and helping the 150,000 plus sports organizations playing the programming of sport to operate better, right? These are small and medium-sized businesses for the most part across the United States. All the way down through the coach, the parent, the player, and the fan, right? Whether that's through content, I'm sure we can get into media and video and wearables, but that kind of end to end from a technology perspective, all of those, again, quote unquote, kind of picks and shovels along the way of how do you enable the programming of youth sports to come to life. That's really where TeamSnap's been. And, we see all aspects of growth across that TAM.
Yeah. Let me add in there, Andrew, just think about it. Take the number that Pete throws out of 70 million. Only 8 million of those kids are in high school.
Yeah.
This is 8 to 14. And the things TeamSnap can do, the communication, the majority, 85% of this participants in this are not driving themselves to practice, are not driving themselves to the game. The parents are doing it. So the whole family is involved. So trying to bring that all together, especially the communication. The parents just need the communication. That's the struggle. It's just the struggle.
Yeah, and it's the fragmentation, right, Dave? Because you get that. I mean, we always use the term the Disney family of sport. Now, this is also because we acquired a business that was started by a former Disney executive. But that 4 to 14-year-old range, the technology services and expectations for those families are significantly different than the elite level high school players that Dave's mentioning here from 4 to 18, right? And being able to really segment out that market, you're seeing the technology, you're seeing the impact of professional collegiate, both on the analytics and through NIL, really impacting that upper end of the market relative to high school and elite. But the technology requirements, the programming requirements of that long tail of participation, that makes up the bulk of youth sport participation across the United States, right? And there's fundamentally 2 different ways to go approach each of those.
And I think both of you have talked to me about this before. but you even break youth sports down into multiple different segments. And I know you sort of just kept it high level there, but how do you, if you can rehash, I think it's like 5 to 8 or 8 to 12, or how do you look at it from all the different segments? Maybe it was you, Dave, that told me that once of how you guys did it, of like, hey, you should attack the 5 to 8 if you want to do X, Y, Z, or so anyway, if you can go deeper on that.
You think about it, take it 18 months to 18 years old, crib to college. From 1 to 5 years old, kids aren't in school yet, so parents are spending time with them in the morning for activities. Then from 5 to 8, you're keeping them busy. Then I would go from 8 to 10, where they want to have fun. It needs to be safe. They need to be smiling when we're done. And then about 11 years old, both parents get involved and say, hey, are you developing my kid for high school? Are you getting ready? And that's your 11 to 14. And then we all know what happens at 14. Parents get a little bit crazy and things change. So you go from enrichment in the beginning, introduction to sport, then you develop them, and then it turns to high school.
Yeah, and then Andrew, I'd layer on top of fully everything Dave just talked about is like that basis, and we fully agree and align there. I think you then also layer on the lens of rec, for-profit, nonprofit, volunteer-led, small, medium-sized business on top of that. From a technology perspective, if you look at the evolution of the youth sports tech market, like at the end of the day, 10 years ago, it primarily started, with maybe the exception of TeamSnap, the majority of kind of the OGs in the space were going after the registration dollars, right? How do you go build a technology platform to capture those reg dollars? And that's been a race to zero, right? And of the 150,000 plus organizations, you probably have about 25,000 of them that are doing over 1 million registration capture and volume. And then it's the long tail again, right? And the needs of a volunteer-led organization, the simplicity of the technology versus the sophistication of a business the size of 3Step that Dave was building, vastly different, right? And the ability to use technology to augment the coaching experience, specifically from a volunteer perspective, is that much more important, right? And again, talking about the full participation of youth sports, right? It's not just the kids, but it's the biggest gaps are both registration fees and a shortage of volunteer coaches, right? And those are accessibility points.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you this both, and it's from different lens, but you, and obviously Pete, you were sort of on the inside of this at WAD, and you're coming in and seeing this opportunity. Dave, you were already building it and you had someone else come and influx it. But at WAD, what were you looking at, Pete? It's the first investment really into sports, if I'm wrong on that, where you, and I know we talked about some of the data, but it was like, okay, it's now time to jump in. And this is all, for both of you, happened over the last decade.
Yeah. So, look, I played sports through high school, right? Andrew, I wasn't as good as you guys. I didn't get to go play in college, but this has always been a huge passion point for me. I now have 3 boys that are 6'4" and 2, and we're in Southern Connecticut, which is, one of the meccas of youth sports and probably everything that's right and wrong with the industry that we talk about all the time. And, as we were looking at kind of the different end markets from a vertical software perspective, it was, is there fragmentation? Is there an ecosystem of very different stakeholders whereby you can go build a very successful software business for any one of those stakeholders, but the real relationship from our value of our platform is the relationships that we're able to then facilitate. And whether those can be, whether those are directly monetized or it's communication or there's data that drives from it. And, youth sports was an area that, from my experience kind of advising and investing in a couple of companies, saw just front row seat of how massive this market was, how massive it's going to be. And on top of that, the fragmentation, right? And from an investment perspective, if you're able to enter in with a cornerstone asset like TeamSnap, where we knew we can go build a B2C, B2B, B2B2C type of model, the value of the reach of what TeamSnap had built over a decade just stood out, right? As given the thesis we were going to look to execute as the area to start, and bringing the value of the technology to the parents, to the families, that was the basis, right? We then went and built the B2B reg platforms and everything else that had been in the space for a long time. But that communication aspect of it, to the point Dave made before, who's driving the kids? Where are you going? Who's bringing the oranges? Which uniform to build? Like, that's just key to let the families operate, right? And that's really the big value that we were looking at as we kind of scan the market and did the research.
Yeah, it helps to look at it now. We went down a different path. We needed everything Pete and they were making, but we went out and said, these operators are so overwhelmed by everything they have to do that's not to do with the sport. So we looked at it as, how could we build a shared services model to say, okay, you're you were a professional baseball player and now you're running a club baseball team. And when you started, you had 4 teams and you were spending 90% of your time on the field and coaching. And now you spend 10% of your time because you're doing your books, you're doing registration, you're doing everything. So our pitch was, hey, you entered this because you love the sport, you love to coach, you love to be with the kids. Let us take all of that off. And the easiest, because we're talking to sports people, the easiest way to look at it is, hey, we're going to be the college. I'm the AD. You go coach your team. We'll feed the kids. We'll house the kids. We'll get them in school. We'll make sure they go to class. We'll do everything. You just worry about that. And the goal is by taking that burden, that time burden off these operators, they didn't go and sleep more. They just spent more time with the kids, more time on the field, doing those different things. So the whole premise we had was, how can we make that the operator's life better, which it wasn't trickle down. It flowed right down to the kids and the parents. They're more accessible. They're everything.
And Scott, I know you got one, but I want to. So
Go for it. Yeah,
from an evaluation standpoint, you acquired a lot of these different clubs and events and operators. Like, what did you look at? What went into it? Because I still do believe there's a lot of opportunities for people that want to make impact and go start these things. And now there's this whole roll up of groups like 3Step and some other ones that we'll get to in a little bit. But what were you really looking for? What did you look at? What went into? Hey, we're going to acquire, because I mean, you've done a lot of M&A work, probably more than anyone that's listening or anyone on this call.
Yeah, learned a lot right from day one. We had, I had kids that played field hockey, football, baseball. So, okay, I knew that community and I could go have those conversations. We go and we said, hey, we're going to go into volleyball. And I start making a couple calls and it's like, no, you're not a volleyball guy. You're not a volleyball guy. You're not a volleyball guy. We had to pivot and go make sure that we weren't just going and finding the best revenue driver, the best market people. We had to go find the most respected people inside their sport so they could teach us about the sport, but they could also lend a little bit of credibility to my speech of, hey, we're trying to do shared services. I'm not trying to tell you how to do volleyball or basketball or your sport. So the thing I learned, probably not fast enough, but the biggest impact is you had to find your way into the sport with good people. So we tried to find the best people, the best operator for the parents and the kids. Our job was to try and make them more profitable, make them better business-wise, but the best business people are maybe not the best coaches and the best service providers. So we had to go find those respectful people, and we got better at it every time. Not to say that the first ones we didn't get weren't good people, but it was a conscious thought to that.
Super cool. I'm going to keep it sort of on path, but I'm going to go a little more theoretical here, right? And as we look at the roll-ups that are taking place in this space, we're watching both from facilities and tech platforms, a lot of overlap in sport, but we're seeing a lot more individual, like single sport focused as kids are going, down the path, especially when you start to look at the disruption with NIL and the commercialization of the athlete. And so I'm curious through both of your guys' lens, because you guys are aggregating so many athletes, how do you think about promoting multi-sport as they're going through the developmental phase? Is it something that you guys focus on? Would love your insights there.
Yeah. Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah. So look, let me answer it from a technology perspective, right? We've made the decision, TeamSnap made the decision, we've continued to go down the path of building a horizontal platform, right? One that provides services to a multitude of end markets versus much more of like a sub-vertical focus, which you're kind of mentioning here, like how does technology help facilitate elite soccer clubs? And so from a technology operating perspective, like we've needed to then build the operating infrastructure to allow us to listen to the market, right? And we've really honed in across our top 8 team sports. That's always been the real niche of TeamSnap, was more of the organization of groups, or the team entity as that construct. And we've known that, there's a lot of overlap with what individual sports need, but we've had to pick our spots, right? I mean, I'd say all of us are still, relatively small when you talk about just the macro size of the end market, large technology companies, large organizations. And it's been critical and ensuring that the team is disciplined in what the focus is around our ICP, around our target market. Now, relative to kind of access across, or the hindrance of specialization within youth sports, it is a challenge that I think we're all balancing on a day in and day out basis. Like, I don't think anyone has an answer right now, right? I think because of the fragmentation, the scale, the tribal nature of what's going on. Again, I'm living it, right? 6 years old, and my oldest is 6 years old, and we're already seeing, like, you either play travel baseball or travel lacrosse. I'm like, the kid's going to be 7 in the spring. Like, we're barely learning through this. And there is definitely a tribe mentality of, hey, this is what everyone else is doing. And so you got to kind of draft into it. And, I think from a TeamSnap perspective, we've looked to really help partner with organizations outside of just the sports operators, but that help to educate parents around the benefit of sport, right? Let's not get lost on the top less than 1% of student athletes receiving NIL money coming into high school. What are all those lifelong lessons that you might be overlooking or not allowing your kid to be able to participate in and leverage that? Someone like me, I go back to thinking about how my head coach in football ran our varsity team, right? That was much more impactful to my professional career than maybe some of the skills we're learning on the field. And you got to continue to make sure, we as providers in the space are doing everything we can to help educate parents and organizations on the dual benefit on both sides of it.
I'm so glad you took it there. Real quick, Dave. And Pete, I think, so much what we talk about is humanizing this, right? And we get so lost in the sauce, and this is just a little snippet of our life. But sometimes we get focused, or, we get off track, and the real lessons of sport come in your species from that high school coach or from those early developmental ages. So love that you took it there. Dave, would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't have as much effect. We wanted to have the best programming we could have, but didn't really drive kids from one sport to the other. If you can provide that programming, hopefully that's making it better for the parents to be able to keep them into multi-sport. The big thing we tried to solve, because I think it's the number one biggest problem in these sports, is there's no place to play. That's these facilities. There's no place to play. And everybody says, well, they got to swim at 4 o'clock in the morning. They got to play ice hockey at 10 o'clock at night. Well, that's because there's only so many private facilities and only so many people can afford it. And I'm in Massachusetts, so I'll pick on Massachusetts right now. If you're a Massachusetts parent and you sat back and said, outside of town, when's the last time you played on your high school or middle school fields? They don't let you, especially after COVID. Yeah, we were able to rent gyms in high schools before COVID. Then COVID, we couldn't get in. And then since then, it's not facilities for public schools are not revenue drivers, right? It's not something they think about. They're like, oh, we got to have more janitorial services. We got to have this. It just becomes a hassle for them. So now the biggest limiter of number of kids being able to play is there's no place to play, from gyms to fields to things like that. We were talking about it up here in Massachusetts yesterday about baseball. If you are in Massachusetts, there is one facility that has more than 2 turf fields, baseball. If not, we have to drive either to New York or Pennsylvania. One, in one of the largest population areas in the country. And then you've got down South Carolina, North Carolina, they're building these beautiful facilities, but there's just not as many people there. And the land is expensive, the build is expensive, and it's reversed. Where the beautiful fields are, the people aren't, and where the people are, they're using it for sky rises and things like that. So I think the biggest challenge is, how do we figure out to get access at the schools for everybody to play, not just private clubs that can pay for it, everybody. Those you drive by fields and gyms and they're empty. Why are they empty?
And from a challenges perspective, we brought up fragmentation and now not enough places to play. Any other things from the building side when you were at 3-Step that you saw that were challenges besides really the fragmentation and the places to play?
Yeah, it's just the fragmentation of, there's just so many, and there's, like Pete said, everybody's small. There's, you go out, and if you just sat and went out to everybody who's looking at this and said, name non-technology youth sports programs that do more than $25 million in revenue, there's less than 10.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, okay, maybe that's why a lot of them haven't been purchased, but how do you put them all together to benefit like they're part of a bigger company? And that was the goal. That's what we're trying to do. The operator is so important because you have to remember if you ask my wife, who my son played baseball for, she'll say, show baseball. If you ask him who he played, he names the operator, Steve Lemazny. And so everybody looks at it different, but it's about the operator. The operator is the person that we were investing in. If we take care of the operator, they'll take care of the fans. That should be the driver. Companies just aren't taking care of the operator, and there's so many. I don't think maybe they know how.
Dave, let me ask a question on that, because there's always a unique relationship between the NGOs that are sort of at the top from like an operating standpoint and the relationship as we look at other technology providers or roll-ups. And so I'm curious, when you guys were building Three-Step, did you work with some of the larger governing bodies? And if you did, what did that relationship look like to create that continuity for the athlete through their journey?
Well, that's another problem, is you have some, my opinion, some good governing bodies and some you don't. Some are very involved and some are not. But if you look at the majority of them and look at their revenue line, they're event operators. So in a sense, they're competitors. And that was a struggle. You want to work with them, you want to promote the sport, but okay, I'm promoting the sport and you're holding a tournament on the same day we are. How are we both supposed to exist? And there was a lot of conversations about that. And some organizations, they weren't involved. Some you were deep competitors with them and it didn't sit well. And others, you were competitors and you all sat down and said, okay, let's work together. Let's do joint ventures. Let's have tournaments not on the same day and try and make the sport better. It was a lot.
Interesting. And Pete, I'm going to come over to you. Same question, right? On the NGO side, like, it's a little different coming through a technology lens. What does that, sort of lens look like for you?
Yeah. Look, one, I think all sports are vastly different in how they're run at a national scale, right? And, there are certain areas where we've elected to partner because we can provide value. And there's other areas where we've elected to kind of adhere to the guidelines and, stay within the rails of how the overarching structure of the sport is being created. It is not going back to focus, right? It has not been an area of primary focus as a direct customer for us right now. But it's one that we're always, very focused on, especially if you think about kind of the pull through of background checks and safe sport, et cetera. Like there's requirements there we need to continue to hit on.
Renee, you've done some as well. You mentioned some earlier. How do you think about that, whether partnering or acquiring companies? And then once you do acquire something, how are you making it all work and mesh well together, especially I'm not a technical person, but I'm sure that's a large piece of making it work.
Yeah, and look, different approaches for different entities at different points, right? We took our strategy was definitely different from the one that Dave had so much success with at Three-Step. We wanted to present a balanced approach to getting to profitable growth through both organic and inorganic, right? And we really used them as an M&A in two primary areas. One, are there natural synergistic markets that kind of overlap with our current distribution or customer base so that I can provide more value to the stakeholders that are already on the platform, whether that be parents, whether that be teams. In our first acquisition, it was league side, so much more around national, large regional brands that wanted to reach all of these youth sport organizations, youth sport families, right? And bringing the sponsorship model down into youth sports, and think logos on jerseys, banners in the outfield, but being able to do so at national scale, which align very well also with our community impact efforts, right? About 40 cents on every dollar coming through is going directly back down to the sports organization. We've given back over 15 million to sports organizations across the country over the last couple of years to help with the cost of registration, the cost of uniforms, the cost of operation, field maintenance, as Dave was mentioning before. And then the second was more of a roadmap accelerant, right? With Mojo Sports. And there, we will be completing a lot of the integration work that's been taking place. That's a big lift, right? That was much more of a tech tuck-in, full kind of integration on the back end. With it, we were able to bring on a stable of partnerships with the professional leagues, which we've been able to bring to market over the course of the last 8 months through much more coach and player development content. And, in the earlier part of next year, you'll see kind of the broader completion of the platform integration. And, Andrew, that was for thing about Mojo was a couple of years in, right? Kind of seed, early stage funding. had a decision either go raise a big round or be able to partner with TeamSnap, because what was the thing they needed? They built some of the best mobile tech on the market. They needed distribution, right? And that's where our value is coming in. And so I think finding kind of those complementary needs of an organization, regardless of how mature they are or where they are in their growth cycle, if you can find that right kind of synergy and that relationship of what both organizations need, and then go do all of the prep work before you close the deal to make sure, yeah, that we can make this thing come to life. That to me is what the difference is between a great acquisition, at least on the tech side. And
super cool. Dave, any thoughts on that side? And I know it's you're not the technology guy, with being the old one on the call. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, where they can provide, Pete's going to provide that distribution for people. We were trying to provide that shared service, right? You have to give them something, right? You have to be better together. And I mean, that's all I think everybody's trying to do, hopefully, is it might be different things, but you're all just trying to be better together.
100%. Yeah, and look, if you think about what Dave and I both talked about, though, we use tech, he used shared services. We were both focused on one thing. How do you allow the organizations, the coaches, and the parents to focus on the kids on the field, right? And kind of take over all the back office operations, because that's where we specialize. That's where we focus. So, like, how do you help really allow these businesses to focus on what's core to youth sports? And that's ultimately the kids and the competitiveness.
Yeah. There's only so much you can do, only so much Pete can do, companies can do. So I think the operator is the most important person. So if you make the operator better and free up their time, it's going to directly affect the parents of the kids, whether that's through technology, just number of hours doing bookkeeping, whatever it may be, just make the operator better.
So I'm curious, the space is changing pretty drastically. I mean, it's a really exciting time to be in sports, but we're watching some massive moves, at the collegiate level, which has sort of been a break point for youth sports that separated the real transition. With you guys working so closely with the operators, with the influence that is now, directly working with the kids, I'm curious how you guys approach the educational side of the fence. NIL has been a hot button item for the last couple of years. We've watched it shift and move. We watched a power paradigm sort of happen in sports, where the athlete is sitting almost as an equal at the fence or at the table with a coach. I'm super curious, either through the tech or through the organizers, are you guys leaning into that side of the fence to try and bring some continuity and education tidbits, or are you staying away from it and letting it sort of happen as it does? Pete, maybe I'll come to you and start there.
Yeah. Andrew, we go back kind of the segmentation of the market, right? We're focused on that 4 to 14-year-old range, and we really stayed within that lane, because that break point of where NIL at this point, all practically speaking, right, outside of like a 12-year-old getting Nike golf NIL money, but like practically speaking, we're talking about high school elite athletes. And so our education focus has much more been around the soft skills, mental health, physical health, partnering with companies or organizations like the Positive Coach Alliance, the Aspen Institute, to help use our, again, distribution to be able to get that great content that they're building into the hands of sports organizations and the coaches and the parents, right? Because a little notification that pops up and like, hey, we know your game's about to end in 45 minutes, not going well. Here are the top 3 things not to say to your kid, or here are the top 3 questions to try to engage with them, right? Like just small things like that to help educate. And then we have an entire kind of community impact arm that has been focused on direct donations, subsidizing a sport, more focused on the accessibility, which I think also ties directly into education, and then more at a macro level in terms of advocacy work that we've been doing to impact state, federal budgeting for youth sport CapEx investments.
Which is so cool, because I think that at that 4 to 14, those are the foundational formative years, right? And so if we lay that right foundation as we make the transition, sometimes I think that phase actually gets overlooked. And so we show up and throw up when we get to high school, and we really don't know what we're doing from the athlete and or the coach's side. So super important on that side. Appreciate you calling it out. Dave, would love your thoughts on it.
Yeah, what Pete started with is I focused on 14 and under. You have the 8 million kids that are in high school. So as it trickles up from there, the elite teams are important. I'm leaving the NIL thinking and where it's going to those people. It's not my wheelhouse. I think it's going to change again. It's going to change in 2 years. It's going to be different in 10 years. Youth sports, kids are always going to be 6, 10, 12, 14. Stay down there. We use TeamSnap to give them that education. And I think it's about educating the parent more than it is about educating the kid. And most parents think that every Division One, Division Two, and Three get full scholarships in every sport. Parents just need to be educated that there's only so many 100% scholarships. There's only so many scholarships. There's only so much NIL money. There's only this. It's for a very, very small piece. So if you can educate them to, if you're thinking about colleges, as I always told my kids, it's your path to get into a better college. That way. That's where you can educate them, because it's just such a small number of people that NIL and college is going to affect. Kind of always left it to the people that are focusing on it. They'll do a better job than I would do.
Yeah, well said.
Smart man. We can only, eat the elephant one bite at a time, man. And, and I think staying in that lane, right, being, tightening the aperture and, really being maniacally focused on that. Like you said, it's a lifetime worth of problems and or opportunities, depending on how we're looking at it in the youth sports sector. So really appreciate the insight there. I'm curious, right? We've sort of talked about how you guys got into it, where some of the opportunities are. Where is the space going? We talk about, we throw a $40 billion market cap out there. We're watching all of these different technologies and innovations start to come into the space. Pete, I'm really curious through your lens, like, where do you see the youth sports space maybe 12, 18, 24 months over the next couple of years?
Yeah, Scott, right, from our lens, again, everyone has their own perspective, right? And I think a lot of that shape and form where you are in the market and the services you're providing. We're primarily focused in three main areas. One, how do you just continue to improve the overall organization of sport? And that's a statement, not just building better software, but how do you leverage and provide data in a more simplistic way so that a volunteer-led organization can understand trends of what's going on within the community, within their organization, which ultimately impacts planning for the following year, right? And then once you have kind of that core data flow, yeah, you can have the conversation about how do you leverage AI, ChatGPT type of bots to sit on top of that? Because, where we're going here is you're not going to need to be a data analyst in order to understand all these trends, right? You should be able to have kind of that back and forth conversation. And again, especially for the volunteer-led organizations, the small for-profit organizations that don't have the infrastructure, that simplicity is going to be critical. Two, I'd say all things media, right? And that's a statement around accessibility to highlight films, sharing of experiences across family members. From our view, like, an 8-year-old is going to get a whole lot more excited if he's got a Nickelodeon slime overlay on top of his flag football touchdown versus understanding how quickly he was running. And so, how do we continue to merge the fun of technology with what's going on in the field with the ultimate goal of continuing to drive participation, right? There's so many options that are out there right now, whether it be, esports or alternative sports. Like, how do we continue to use technology to make the game fun? Again, going back to the balance of do not put all of the pressure on the kids. Like, let them get on the field, on the courts and the rinks, take advantage of everything they're going to learn. And we're going to help facilitate that at a family experience. We're going to go do that. And then third is really that, I mentioned the family experience, like the reality and why what, David and others are building, I think is so critical and important right now is like the experience that a family goes through. And in most cases across the country, the drain that youth sports puts on a family, whether the financial burden or now the need to go travel from Massachusetts down to New York because you need more fields, like that's an impact on the family itself. And so how do we continue to use our technology to improve that overall family experience, whether it's through organization, through communication, through really unifying all the services that a family needs in a 3 to 6 month season, right? And whether that be more on the apparel and video side, as we talked about, but continuing to leverage our distribution channels to go help that.
3 key pillars. Dave, your turn.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I'm going to take the negative tone. We started off the time together and we said we got into this because the bar was low, right? Parents weren't getting what they need. And I'm not talking about technology. I'm talking about at events and operators. How is this space going to be fixed so that the level of events, coaching, safety, everything gets better, but it goes to a larger group? It's still goes only the ones that were bought by somebody rolled up into something are benefiting from this. How do we get everybody to benefit from the fields, from coaching, from everything, non-technology things? And I just don't see it happening. And I don't know how it can happen because maybe it's too fragmented. But what can we do? Who's going to take advantage of the opportunity for everybody to just get it to the masses? You can get technology to the masses. You can't get the operation to the masses. Or at least we haven't figured it out yet. And I look out there, you guys know I look at everything every day. Nobody's doing it. Nobody's trying. Right? So hopefully, somebody's going to put their hand in the air, and, there's a lot of money out there and there's a lot of smart people out there, and just say, okay, for 2 years, for 6 years, for 10, for 12, we're going to make this better, from coaching to safety to facilities, the actual operations. Somebody's got to step up. Otherwise, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. We did a lot of work over 4 years I was there with 3-step, and we got a lot accomplished. But we're such a small piece because it's so big. It's so big. So I think it's a challenge right now.
And Dave, do you see it coming in, or would you even see it from a professional league like the NBA or MLB coming down? Like, who do you think could have better success, sort of, going around the side here?
Has to be private. The leagues have enough to worry about. They're big business. It has to be private that finds the people that can be flexible and go get that done. It just has to be private money and getting everybody on the same page, getting as many people as possible. Because here's the simple one is, you can go put on a lacrosse event for all the club teams of kids that pay. Why aren't there events on weekends for town teams as accessible as this? There has to be more access to something more than practice, to leagues, to events, to play days, to round robins, whatever you want to call them. You don't have to hand out a trophy at the end. You don't have to have brackets. You don't have to have anything. Just how do you get the kid that is playing a sport at the town level, rec level, during the week, and they want to go out and feel the same thing of playing competitively, being around more kids? That's just not being offered. Nobody's doing it because you're going to the tournaments that make so much money. It's hard, and it's just really not. I can say it's not for lack of effort, but it's so big. It's just so big.
And this, just sticking with you real quick, because it might be a little bit easier for you to answer than Pete, having advising, investing across the space. Where are the opportunities, or where, if you were going to start a company again as a founder, or where, if you were a big investor, where would you be looking, you see as the best opportunity per se?
Well, we know I can only think about one or two things at one time, and I don't understand technology. So I just go right back to where we were. How do you set up a model for these operators that's got shared services, and you put the tech, you put the apparel, you put safe sport, background checks, 1099 thing in there, and it might not, it's more of a franchise, or is not the right way to say it, but why do you have to go acquire everybody? Why can't you just start a services company that says, okay, we're going to partner with TeamSnap, Players Health, each and every one that does a good job, and for a small percentage fee, everybody, you can join it, right? And then you can try and monetize that way. You can't go out and buy 1,000 event operators and clubs that do $200,000, $300,000 in revenue, but they need the most help, right? Mm-hmm. So they're getting it technology-wise, they're not getting it services-wise. They're not, an accountant, a lawyer, anything. And then you try and monetize it through apparel sales and sponsorship. So I'd like to see somebody create a services company that people can join into, have good partnerships. That services company doesn't need to recreate TeamSnap or, again, Players Health or anybody like that. They just need to bring and there's ways for that investor to make money, for sure. And not a lot of legal fees trying to do roll-ups.
It's super cool. And I think there's a lot of builders that are listening into this. And, so often we, Andrew and I sit in, the seat where we get to see a ton, no different than, the both of you guys. And we see a lot of iterations of the same thing over and over again with small, minor variations. And so sometimes success leaves clues. It's just a matter of where you guys are paying attention. And these two have, seen the space in a big way. Dave has done it. If you're building, I would highly encourage you to really embrace where the opportunity is. I think sometimes we have this vision, but that doesn't always align with where the gap is in the in the market. So Dave, I appreciate the insight there. Pete, your hands might be tied a little bit because you wear so many hats over there, but any thoughts that you want to layer on top of that?
No, look, I think Dave said it well, right? And we're going to continue to stay focused on, hopefully at some point I'll be in Dave's position and being able to help out a much broader swath of potential, entrants and growth companies in the market.
I love it. Well, listen, gentlemen, this has been absolutely amazing. We got a lot of really good questions that we tried to sprinkle through here. Just want to give you guys the floor sort of as parting words. So Pete, what is the message back to the Profluence community, to the larger ecosystem, from your side?
Yeah, look, I think regardless of from what perspective we're all coming at this and of what size, right? I think all of us need to remember that we are in this because at the end of the day, we're helping to facilitate kids, whether it be through the age of 18 or older, play the game of sport, right? And from a vendor, service provider, partner to this ecosystem and community to use sports, it's something that I've ingrained in the culture at TeamSnap. It was ingrained through the founders as it started, and we've continued to double down there because that makes us a real partner in my mind. And as I talk about partnership, and Dave hit it a little bit, like we're not going to be everything to everyone, and being able to find the right partners across this ecosystem. It is a young market, right? And we got to continue to evolve and mature together. And the closer that we can all work, the more value we're going to bring to this ecosystem, and frankly, the stickier we all get. Right? Because now we're part of a larger kind of integrated service offering. And that's beneficial, right? To the sports organizations, coaches, families, fans. So appreciate the time, guys. I love what you're doing, and this conversation's been great.
Back at you, man. Back at you. All right, Dave, bring us home, man.
Short and sweet. No matter what perspective you have on this, as Pete said, it's about the kids. Almost more importantly, it's about mom and the kids. You can't forget about what the parents are going through because they're delivering the message. They're doing everything for these kids. So if you just, no matter which way you're looking at it, focus on how to make everything better for parents and kids. It might not be sexy, might not be kids dunking and doing different things and NIL money, but that's where you're going to do the right thing, and that's where this market is. That's the bulk of the kids. Yeah. So, and again, like Pete said, thank you guys for doing this. Love what you're doing.
Drop the mic. All right, fellas. Well, we're going to pull you off. Andrew and I are going to wrap this up. We'll circle up with you offline, and really, really appreciate your time, insights, knowledge, and everything you're doing for the space. So we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, so. See you, Pete.
All right, Andrew. Now that was pretty cool, my friend. Your biggest takeaway from that, and then we'll bring this home. But I mean, they dropped a ton of little nuggets and knowledge bombs. What did you pull?
Yeah, I have a ton of notes written down, and again, I will say this: like, we make these open to everyone, but I gain sometimes the most insights of anybody, and I'll go re-listen to this a few times and really dissect it. But I think the first is there's a big opportunity. It might feel like TeamSnap is winning a huge piece of the tech market, or 3Step won a huge piece of the event operator side, but there's still a lot more opportunities, which to me is encouraging for both sides. And also it all comes down to the people, like anything. Are you providing the most value to the kids, to the parents, to the operators? And if you can do that and make it collaborative, you can win, and a lot of people can win. And then other than that, you can see, like, just on the personal side, Pete, Dave, super smart guys that also have a good mission, and from and obviously I've had a lot of private conversations as well, so I know them a little deeper, but it's a good intention at heart, and business is business, so you're trying to monetize it the best way possible, but they're doing it with the right end goal in mind. And I'll throw this out because it wasn't really said, but I do believe the more you can start to, because of all the fragmentation, the more you can start to consolidate the space. A lot of people go, oh, it's going to get more expensive. It's going to get I think you can actually make it cheaper and better. And TeamSnap even see $15 million donated back. 3Step's done some cool things. You can start to monetize some of the ancillary stuff and make the core, which is the participation, potentially cheaper. And then there are a lot of groups that we weren't able to mention, from a game changer on the tech side. They mentioned Players Health, which is huge on the insurance side, to Unrivaled Sports with the pro sports teams owners coming in, and Perfect Game, and some other groups there now. So there's a lot of different things, and it would have been at some point to go deeper on the full ecosystem. We'll probably do that in a newsletter. So anyway, a lot there, but it was an awesome conversation.
Couldn't agree more. And I'm going to sort of put a bow on it with, a couple takings from my side. One, as a young father, I have a 2-year-old and one on the way. Man, I'm excited. And I don't think that was my sentiment maybe 10 years ago. As I got deeper into it, it is a big problem. But I think we're putting visibility to where a lot of the gaps and the opportunities are to evolve. And I think the folks that we have at the helm across the industry they're top notch. And so that makes me super excited. From the business side, I think so often we become so focused on building in the sports ecosystem that we forget about the periphery. And we had a newsletter I think we put out around the mom economy, and Dave really dug into this. But folks that are building in the sports community, don't forget all the constituents that make this up. It's not all about the player data. There's some incredible ventures that are being sought out around the infrastructure that it takes to put and host these events, around the country, around the world, etc. So if you're coming into the space, as you're growing your venture, be sure to think about it 360. Be sure to keep an open mind, because the space is changing at a pace that candidly we all can't keep up with. But be optimistic, right? Put those kids at the center of your scope, and that's what this is all about, right? Like, don't lose focus of the main thing here, even though there's a lot of dollars floating around. At the end of the day, this is a people first venture. So incredible. We had just over 100 folks show up here on the live, which is, we can't thank, all of you individually, but we see a lot of community members here, which is so exciting. If you're not in the community, this is what's happening every day, mixing, mingling, thought sharing with the leaders of the space. So highly encourage you to hop in and join our tribe. Andrew, talk to me. What you got?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd say is next month going to do a multi-club ownership panel, which is going to be really fascinating as well, and trying to hit different topics. And we're seeing a lot of people go more on the live event space. We're sticking true to the Profluence brand and trying to live more on the digital side. So appreciate everyone being here, and a lot more to go. And again, if you want to interact closer with us, Dave, Pete, and a lot of other great people, we built the community for that. So yeah, it's exciting. Esports a great opportunity.
Let's go. And I'd be remiss, man. We got people from Prague. We got people from South America. We got people from Asia. I mean, this is a global thing that sports pulls us all together. So eternally grateful for all of you guys. And, it's midday. Let's put the shoulder to the plow and keep building. We'll talk soon, everybody.